So we need the data to be more accurate for today's needs. So one of the reasons for that is NAD83, the origin of the ellipsoid, or the center of the Earth representation, is 2.2 meters off what we know it is today through ITRF. And so that was done very well. I mean, for the 80s, I think they had some Doppler measurements, which are satellites. They had a couple GPS data collections that went into NAD83, but it was very hard to estimate what the origin was back then. And the fact that they're only 2.2 meters off is pretty darn good for then. But we know that it's off. And so in the modernized system, we're going to use the same ellipsoid, the GRS-80 ellipsoid, but the origin will be shifted to where we know it is to be today, and it will be aligned with the International Terrestrial Reference Frame, or ITRF. So NAV88 relies on marks in the ground, and so we've got heights on those marks. Many of those marks haven't been visited since they were first surveyed in the 30s and 40s, but we still publish heights on those marks, even though nobody's gone out and done a resurvey. If that's an area where there's ground fluid withdrawal or other natural phenomena where they're causing subsidence or uplift, those heights are not good, although that's still the starting height you use if you have to do a survey to tie into it. And so today's technology really requires better accuracy. One of the primary ways that we're doing that and getting that higher accuracy is through gravity. And gravity is fundamental to every surveying measurement done. So every time surveyors go out to set up a tripod for measuring GPS, they get it plumb. So you'll have a little bullseye level that you get your tripod level to. That's getting into line to the geopotential at that area through gravity. When you're going out and doing the leveling with rods, you get your instrument level to the geopotential there, but each rod also needs to get plumb to that point. And so our understanding of gravity is still evolving from back when Aristotle was first dropping objects, to Galileo, to Einstein's theory of general relativity, which was actually proven correct in 2014 by a group called LIGO that measured gravity waves. And so we still are developing more accurate instruments for measuring gravity. So we have collected 100% gravity for the U.S. states and territories. We've actually even been going out and doing a couple reflights in areas where things are changing rapidly, like in the Gulf. We've also been working with the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency to collect gravity in the Canadian Rockies. So the further out you can go to collect accurate gravity, the better your geoid model will be. So I think there's talks of maybe going to Greenland to collect gravity, mainly because things are changing so rapidly there. And so some of the main benefits for modernizing the National Spatial Reference System are fast, accurate, consistent elevations everywhere through GPS data collection. There will still be a need to go out and do leveling, because leveling is the most accurate way to measure height differences. And that's not going to change anytime soon. But it will be tied to your control points on the ends, and depending on how long your leveling network is, it will be tied to GPS constraints. And so it'll no longer rely on going to a height for an old benchmark that hasn't been visited and who knows how long, and starting with that height. You're going to be starting with GPS-derived heights and then getting very accurate height differences from that point. This will greatly improve public safety. So floodplain maps, having this geopotential data will provide a much better view of where water will flow. Water will always flow to the higher geopotential. So if you can imagine, there's an infinite number of geopotential surfaces radiating out from the Earth that are impacted by gravity. So if you've got a very porous stone over here and a dense granite over there, there's going to be more gravity pulling to the granite because it's a denser mass. And gravity is the attraction of masses. And so these floodplain maps will greatly help knowing where water will pool or flow in certain events, which will then help for emergency route planning. It's much easier to know where water is going to flow in Colorado with the Rockies. Once you get to the flatter plains, it'll be a little bit harder, but this will really help places like Florida that's very flat. And so, and where they can get a lot of hurricanes, a lot of water events. So, and many other places as well. Accurate positioning for autonomous vehicles. So once cars I guess they're already doing this, but once cars are really starting to drive themselves more, you're really going to want to have that accurate coordinate system. Inches are going to matter, specifically when something's controlling a car moving 60 or 80 miles an hour. Building infrastructure models. Having the very accurate building infrastructure models tied to the National Spatial Reference System, so they not only know where they are inside the building, but they know where they are spatially. And then smart cities. So what can you do to prepare? I guess, how many people here know Joseph Kursky or get emails from him? So I know he's a big metadata fan, and he always says, I never metadata I didn't like. And I've met plenty of data I didn't like, but particularly in grad school, all the metadata I had to build for my master's project. But it's very important. So if that data is going to be reused or shared, it needs to be reliable. So you need to have the metadata tied to your data so that people know what it is. They know what datum it's in. You know, is it in NAD 83 2011 or is it in NAD 83 HARN? Is it in SPCS feet, you know, with the U.S. survey foot or international feet? Having that is important. In the modernized system, there will only be the international foot, so we won't have to worry so much about the U.S. survey foot, except for the people that may just still be collecting the U.S. survey foot, even though they're not supposed to. Because I'm sure it's going to happen. Increasing the value and usefulness of that data through this metadata, because you can share it, so people can get it and understand what it's in. If it's GPS data, understand that what geoid model would apply to it, because depending on what datum realization you're using, you should be using a certain datum. You shouldn't be using NAD 83 HARN with geoid 18, because geoid 18 was built on top of NAD 83 2011. So having that data, the metadata about the data, will help you to have your data be more reliable. It will also help you to move it into the future. So when you're trying to transform it or reprocess it into the modernized system, you'll know what you have so that you can apply that later. Trying to get all of your data into the current system. I know there's a number of data sets that are still in NGBD 29. There's still data sets in NAD 27. I hear about that at conferences all the time. Try to get your data into the current systems. It'll be a much easier transformation if you're doing transformations in the modern system. And going out and evaluating these alpha products that I've mentioned. So some of the metadata to consider, I mentioned NAD 83, you having the right realization, knowing, you know, is it the original 1986, HARN, FBN, 2007 or 2011? That's going to be important. Documenting the geoid models again, particularly for the large data sets like LiDAR and other things, you know, what geoid was applied. Documenting the transformations and workflows done to the data. So understanding, you know, not only what your raw data came as, but what things did you do to the data to get it into what you're using. And then understanding the term epoch. So there's two kinds of epochs here. There's kind of the epoch of when your data is collected. In the modernized system, when you collect the data on a point, that's the coordinate. You're going to know where that point was on that day. If an earthquake happens, if the ground sinks or rises, something happens, depending on how many years, the coordinate is going to be good the day you collected it, and then the uncertainty from that is going to grow after that. So there's also the epoch of the datum. And so how many people here have used Opus? So Opus is our online positioning user service. You go out and collect survey grade data. You can submit that data to NGS. It will post-process it with using 3 of the nearest cores to give you a much more accurate coordinate. And it provides you coordinates in ITRF at the survey epoch. So when you collected that data, but it also gives you the NAD 83 2011 coordinate where it transformed that data back in time to the epoch 2010. So these are all things to be aware of when using it. So the modernized system will have an epoch of 2020.0. So determining coordinates in the modernized system, there's going to be several different ways to do this. Starting at the top is the most expensive but most accurate. Going down to the bottom is the cheapest and quickest. So obviously the best thing to do is go out and resurvey that point, particularly because, again, the coordinates are going to be good the day that you collected them. So if things have moved, you know, if you're in New Zealand and they just back, I forget, 10 years ago, they had a series of earthquakes that just caused things to move tremendously. And so going out and resurveying may be the only option, particularly if things are moving fast. You can also reprocess your data. So if you've saved your original observations, so again, these RINEX files that I talked about submitting to Opus, you can submit them to Opus in the modernized system. It'll post-process them, and it'll give you coordinates in the modernized system. That's likely how I think most people are going to do it that really need accurate data, but don't have the money to go out and do resurveying. And then there'll be the transformations. So, if you've got manhole covers or your data set doesn't require high accuracy, then you can likely use the transformations to move that data into the modernized system, and you'll be good with that. So this will be driven heavily by what your accuracy needs are. So I mentioned the terrestrial reference frames. In the modernized system, there will be 4 terrestrial reference frames for each of the 4 plates that have U.S. states or territories. So the Caribbean plate, the North American plate, the Pacific plate, and the Mariana plate. And so each of these plates will have a terrestrial reference frame that's plate fixed to minimize the plate movement. And so when we did NAT 83 2011, we grouped the Caribbean with the North American plate, and we realized that we should have likely had a 4th version of NAT 83 for the Caribbean plate. For anyone that doesn't know, there are 3 versions of NAT 83 2011. There's 2011 for CONUS and Alaska and Puerto Rico and Virgin Islands. There's MA 11 for the Mariana plate, and there's PA 11 for the Pacific. Then we're replacing NAVD 88 with the geopotential datum. And so the geopotential datum is how most people will use it will be through the GeoAid model and GPS. So GPS will be taken, you'll apply this GeoAid model to it, and that's how you'll get your heights or your orthometric heights or elevations in the modernized system. You can see this geoid is huge. Roughly the big grid in the center is roughly a quarter of the Earth's surface, going all the way up, covering all of Alaska, part of Russia, all the way over to Greenland, even down to Africa. But it also includes Hawaii, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands in that same grid. And then we have 2 subgrids for Guam and the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas, and then the American Samoa. It's not just a vertical datum. It will be more than just heights. It will include models for the geopotential, the deflection of the vertical, gravity, and again, the GeoAid model. And so when these datums replace NAT 83 and NAVD 88, there will be an immediate shift. That immediate shift is the transformation or the difference in coordinates. And so those coordinates, the horizontal change will be from half a meter to 4 meters in some places. Ellipsoid heights will change plus or minus 2 meters, and elevation changes will be from half a meter to 2 meters in some places. So there's going to be some significant difference in coordinates and heights. But there will also be a continuous drift. Again, the plates are moving, and they're moving at different rates in different places. And so that continuous drift will be factored in 2 components. Again, that plate tectonic motion, which will be factored out in the terrestrial reference frames because they're plate fixed terrestrial reference frames. And then there will be a residual motion. So ground fluid withdrawal, glacial isostatic adjustment causing uplift. So those types of things will cause 3-dimensional motion that we will capture as best we can with something called the interframe deformation model. And so these immediate shift changes, you can see here on the left, you can see a globe with the horizontal changes. Again, the North American plate's doing different things than the Pacific plate. And then the approximate height changes across CONUS. So you can see Florida, there's not going to be much change. But up in Seattle, there's going to be about 1.3 meters of difference. How we know how the plates are moving is primarily through the cores, so our continuously operating reference station throughout the U.S. This allows us to build models to see how things are moving. This map here shows the way the plates are moving. The Caribbean plate is going off to the northeast. The North American plate is doing a counterclockwise rotation. As it gets to the boundaries between the Juan de Fuca plate, which is plate off of Oregon and Washington, and the Pacific plate off California and down to Mexico. Things are doing kind of called the crunch zone when you come to plate boundaries. But you can see once you get onto the Pacific plate, it's shooting up to the northwest. I believe the Pacific plate's moving about 7 centimeters a year. So in Hawaii and Southern California, that can add up if your data is 10 years old. So the continuously operating reference station that I mentioned a minute ago, we have roughly 2,000 of them that we are collecting data from daily. And so we collect all this data. NGS only owns about 40 or 50 of these sites. Almost all of them are owned by DOTs or other groups that are contributing that data to us. And so they have this cooperative agreement with us to allow us to harvest their data, which then we make available through Opus. And then you can also download the course data if you want to post-process the data yourself in vendor software. So here's a couple local core stations. There's the P037 in Canyon City, and then CTMC in Golden, which is the nearest course to us right now that we have in the NOAA course. I've talked a lot about vertical motion from ground fluid withdrawal as well as natural sedimentation. The Mississippi Delta is having sedimentation where it's causing that area to slowly slip into the Gulf. And that's just a natural thing. There's also ground fluid withdrawal from oil extraction, from water extraction. I've got a couple maps coming up. There's something called glacial isostatic adjustment. So when the glaciers existed, they were huge masses that compressed the land down and pushed mass out. If you can imagine that, like think of like a balloon or something, pushing it down and it pushes things out. After the glaciers melted, that mass is going back in and it's causing land to go up. But it's also causing subsidence on the fringe area where that mass got pushed out and is now vacating. So there's subsidence going along the fringe of where the glaciers existed. There's also geophysical phenomenon from earthquakes, calderas. The Yellowstone caldera can rise and fall, does different things at different times. And then there's natural earth tides. So these earth tides are factored in by the moon, by Jupiter, that cause things. And then just also the wetness. So depending on how wet a place is can cause the ground to swell or retreat. So the map on the left here is from Canada. Their modeling of this glacial isostatic adjustment. You can see right around the southern part of the Hudson Bay, there's uplifting of 8 to 13 millimeters a year, which again, if your data is 10 to 20 years old, that's a decent amount of change to factor in. The San Joaquin Valley, there's a USGS study from 2015 to 2016. The red area you can see there is 20 to 24 inches of subsidence in 16 months. So 2 feet. That's a big difference. If your data is less than a year or just over a year old, that's a big difference. And then you can see this, it's a famous picture from USGS of 8.5 meters of subsidence in 50 years. So I heard there's someone from USGS here. I'd like to see another picture of this because we're coming up to 50 years from 1977. And let's see how much subsidence there's been, because I think there's been even more subsidence in the last 50 years than there was in since 25 to 77. Worked with our Puerto Rico coordinator after they had a series of earthquakes in 2020, making maps for him to see how the heights had changed. They were having 16 centimeters of vertical change after the series of earthquakes they had there in 2020. And then our Pacific Southwest advisor, Dana, was telling me that there was 6 to 10 feet of horizontal change after the China Lake earthquake. I think it's technically the Ridgecrest earthquake, but in China Lake, California, there was 6 to 10 feet of horizontal change. So again, any data collected right before that earthquake, the only real good value to it is to go and repeat collections on those same marks and see how much those marks really moved, because those old coordinates are not going to be where that place was anymore. A big campaign that we had going was the GPS on Benchmarks campaign. You can still submit to this. We have done a final poll for the building the transformation tool, but you can still collect data and it will still be reprocessed. What we're doing right now is we're working on this national adjustment with all the data that have been submitted that we harvested. After we do that data, we will then use those coordinates to build the transformation tools. And after those are done, we'll be doing another harvest of data to reprocess them and give those any new data that's been submitted RAC coordinates. So you can still submit data to us, and it will be used in creating modernized coordinates. And that really picked up. I think, no, I started a little late, so I'm going to probably go a little bit more late. But most ways people submitted data to us for that GPS on Benchmarks campaign was through OpenShare. So you can really see in 2018, there was a huge push for the Geoid 18 for us to build the most accurate geoid we could back then. And so the uptick in data collected significantly increased. And then again, with the transformation tools, it really took off in 2021. And so we've got 79,000 of these open shared solutions. Again, these are all going to be reprocessed and given modernized coordinates when we put out the new datums. So Colorado has 619. You can see Denver is obviously the busy area and the whole corridor going up to Fort Collins. Yeah, there's some in Durango and through there. If you're not a surveyor and don't have a geodetic quality receiver, you can still go out and find marks and do mark recoveries for us and let us know the quality, the condition of marks. Let us know where that mark is. Even just using sometimes marks have scaled positions. You can even use your phone and give us a better position than we often have for the scaled ones, because if they have scaled positions, that means that surveyors, when they were using that mark and trying to estimate the coordinate, were using topo plots. So back in, before the 70s and all that, they were using topo plots to determine positions primarily for our vertical benchmarks. But you can go out with your phone today, give us a more accurate coordinate, take a picture, and a picture's worth 1,000 words for us to see the condition of that mark. If you're trying to find data, the NGS map is the best place to go. This is where you can go find data sheets. You can see the open shared solutions and then the cores. And there's links to different tools. So the data sheets are linked from the data sheets, the open shared solutions from the open share, and then you can go to the cores site page if you want to download data or evaluate it. My favorite utility is the share widget. This is going to have to get a facelift because I built this with Web App Builder. That's going away this summer, so I've got to transition this over to Experience at some point when I've got time. But luckily, I've built a few experiences now, so I've got more familiarity with it. But the share widget is key. That's what's been one of my biggest holdouts to Experience, because with the share widget, when I'm working with a user that's asking about a control mark or anything, or doing a survey in an area, I can get a URL that takes them directly to that location. So that's key. Our first cut at a visual data sheet. So how many people here, when I talk about a data sheet, how many people here know what data sheets are? So a handful of. A data sheet is a legacy format we have that's 80 characters wide, built on punch card technology. So you can just imagine how old that is, but it's been very useful and valuable for decades. But we've got nice technology today to make it more visual. So the passive marks page is the first cut at a visual version of the data sheet. We will be having a new version come out when the modernized system comes out. But the really useful thing here is being able to see if there's photos available right away. For anyone that's used data sheets, you've got to click this photos link, and often when you click the photos link, it says no images available. So, yeah.
Question for you: will the new data, when the new system, new datums come into play, will all data sheets be upgraded to with new positions, or only the ones you may have had open share, or how's that work? Across the board, they'll all be having the new values on them?
So they should all have new coordinates. Okay. If they were a triangulation station, I think it will likely be transformed coordinates. Okay. We are not doing any triangulation in our national adjustment, so it'll all be GPS. So that have the real reference epoch coordinates. I'm not sure what they'll be flagged as, but there'll be one that are basically like today's adjusted versus scaled or handheld one. So they'll be transformed. Very, thank you. Yep. We've got a number of ArcGIS Online resources that you can use. You can bring these into your desktop GIS, add them to your web maps. The data sheets are updated weekly now. The cores and the open shared solutions are updated nightly. And then before we had access to the tiled image services, when I made the Geo818 map, I used raster tile services. So you could just visually see the values. Whereas now with the new alpha products, we're putting out tiled image services, which you can click and get pixel values. You can do an extract by mask if you just want Colorado or someplace. So those are going to be a lot more useful. I'm going to wrap up here. We've got 4 alpha products available: SPCS, NCAT, EPPs, and NapGD. The primary way to evaluate the SPCS is through NCAT. So the alpha NCAT has all the SPCS zones in them, so you can plug in coordinates. Here's a quick page of the SPCS. I don't want to take too much of John's time, and John's going to be talking about this, so at least Colorado, or I should. We made the ability for states to create their own zones if they wanted to have low distortion projections. So Joey and John were the big drivers behind Colorado's 35 LDP zones. NGS allowed states to have 3 different layers for each state. So every state got a statewide zone. That was a given. We did that for every state, even Alaska, which has crazy distortion, but every state has its own zone. Then the second layer could be what we call a multi-zone complete. So multiple zones that have complete state coverage. Then there's a multi-zone partial. So a state has partial coverage. So you could, right now, Colorado has a multi-zone complete. If you decide you want more specialized LDPs in certain areas, you will be able to add zones at some point in the future to have a multi-zone partial there. We're going from 125 zones in SPCS 83 to 965 in SPCS 2022. Vast majority generated by users is not NGS. We put out an experience where you can go and view these zones, click on the distortion values. It's a great utility. Here's kind of the, in the past, if Colorado wanted to have a statewide zone, you likely used UTM. So here's a difference between the UTM distortion and the preliminary statewide zone. And here's the 35 LDPs for Colorado. Yeah, John will be talking about this. So we just recently put out the SnapGD 2022 experience and interactive computation tool. So please go out and check this out. There's a number of different tabs here to view the geoid model, to the deflection of the vertical model, the gravity model. You can evaluate geoid differences, and you can also see the height differences that are anticipated from, we just call it historical height differences because NAVD88 is only for CONUS and Alaska. You have PRVD for Puerto Rico, BIVD 09 for Virgin Islands. American Samoa and Guam have their own datums as well, vertical datums. So this is showing differences between that. I don't know if we have time for questions.
What are we waiting for and how long are we waiting?
What? Cut to the chase.
How long is uncertain? There's a lot of uncertainty at the moment.
What are we waiting for?
What are we waiting for? Well, we're still working on the national adjustments. I'm on both of the national adjustment teams. We're doing a geometric national adjustment of all the GPS data. We're doing an orthometric national adjustment of the leveling data. We anticipate that being done if things continue to work as they're working, June. At that point, that data needs to build the transformations. We're hoping to have that in the fall. So we're hoping everything will be out by the end of this year. We've got our database. We're working on a database still and our data delivery system. So the new data sheets, the new course pages are done. The new data sheets are mostly done. It's really just getting that database, the data model done. The interframe deformation model, we're still working to finalize that. And those are the things I can think of offhand.
Yep. So I work with a lot of remote sensing data specifically, And I figure most of this probably integrates into how satellites reference their position. Is that correct? Because I'm just trying to figure out how remote sensing plays into all of this, because obviously satellites need to have accurate positioning to tell where the image is being displayed. But I'm just kind of curious if you knew about it. If you don't, I'm not worried.
What I know of remote sensing is generally you'll have ground control points that you use to reference the imagery to. From, again, this is more of what I'm told versus what I know. And, but I believe what the easier way or the most accurate way to change either imagery or even LiDAR will be to reprocess your ground control points and then align your data sets to those ground control points. And then that will provide you the most accurate way of aligning data you've already collected. If you're not so worried about accuracy, again, if accuracy isn't so important, you could just do the transformation on the final data sets.
Very cool.
So I think you were talking about nape imagery. Will this,
Yeah.
when will the nape imagery program, once it's put out, they'll start adopting this is kind of the baseline for their control.
We've been working through the GDA, the Geospatial Data Act, 2018. The National Spatial Data Infrastructure just had a new strategic plan, and then there's an A16 rewrite. So the A16 executive order in the past forced all federal agencies to have to work on NSRS. That was not fully explicit in the current language. We've been working to make things explicit. Again, there's going to be time. Like FEMA doesn't update some maps. I mean, there's some maps I think that haven't been updated since the 70s, if I recall. So they're going to work it into their map building cycle. But again, if it's a 30-year cycle,
It could be
so I think different agencies will adopt it quicker, depending on how easy it is for them to change their workflows. Like the whole 3-depth data set, I'm not sure. Good question. I need to talk to Barry Miller and see what their plan is. But yeah, I think there's some very large data sets now that would be very work intensive to accurately transition it. So they might just go for the less accurate transformation to start with, and then all new data collected is on the new system. Yeah.
So 53 marker, elevation marker on the capital steps.
I should, yes. I think there's actually 2 markers on the Capitol steps, the NGVD 29 one and the 88 one. So I think there will likely be a 2022 one put in. I was just at Geo Week last week. I know one of their stairs going up to the halls up on the top level have a mile-high stair. Not sure what they'll do. Maybe just add formerly. And a couple stairs down. Say the mile-high stairs.
Coors Field with their ring up for the seats.
Yeah.
That'll too.
Yep. So it'll impact all of that.
It won't be going down close to 29s.
Yes.
Yeah. So it might be a dimple on that one. 29 or 22.
Yeah, just that it won't be quite, depending on how accurate they want to be. I saw you here first.
So for people like myself who like to nerd out on the history side of things, are there any the building towers? Are any of those still around?
So there was one of them was set in Jasper, Indiana. I forget. It's hard for me to remember how many years ago it was. 5 to 10 years ago. They found an old building tower that was still in good condition. They relocated that to the city was named for Jasper building, and so they erected a monument there. So there is one there. I think that is the only one I know of. So you had a hand.
Oh, a silly question. Do you know if any of the 14ers will no longer be 14ers? What's the point of it?
So we actually just had a paper come out on that.
Yeah.
And Our paper, we estimate that no 14ers will be lost, but actually the summits are reshuffled. We did pay for that to be open access because it was in the Journal of Geodesy. So if you want to email me, I can send you that paper that goes in what our one of our main scientists went and grabbed all of the 3D data available around the 14ers, and then thanks to Carol, I found I forget the water group had some LiDAR data sets that covered a couple of the 14ers, so he went and got data from them. Reprocessed it all, took the geoids out, put on a new kind of alpha geoid, and then estimated the heights. And so yeah, there's a paper on that, and yeah, no 14ers will be lost.
I sort of have a clarifying question, but from what I'm gathering, this will be mostly useful for terrestrial data, not for airborne or for satellite data. Is that a correct assumption?
Well, I would say that all the aerial and satellite data is collecting often data for the ground. So we'll still impact their coordinates.
Okay.
Because they're all for.
It's all for terrestrial
Yeah.
Observations,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I mean, it seems like this is for collection in terms of terrestrial measurements. Like this is obviously for visualization as well, but it's to create accurate measurement.
Yeah, and just speaking of that, I know many of the drones and other groups publish their data in WC84. WC84 is not defined for civilians.
Mhm.
So there's 2 to 3 meters of uncertainty in WC84. So if you're collecting your data and all of your data is in WC84 and you say it's less than 2 to 3 meters accurate, that is not a correct assumption. So most likely I would say collect your data and reference it to ITRF because NGA says that WC84 is aligned to ITRF, but again, there's we have 6 or 7 realizations of WC84, so you also need to know that because each one of those are aligned to a different version of ITRF, although 2 of them are aligned to the same ITRF, but somehow there's a transformation between them. Yep. 1 minute over when John's supposed to start.